Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Midday Market Update for August, 25th?
It is.
2020. I'm back, Kevin Hill, with Michael Vincent.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Our week hiatus last week.
Yeah, it's been a while, man. It's good to see you again.
It is. It's great.
It's great to be back.
The Midday Market Update, where we talk about the freight markets, where that's moving. Today, it'll be a lot about hurricanes with our founder and CEO, Craig Fuller.
Yeah, we got a great show.
Coming up in a couple minutes.
Yeah, great show. Craig Fuller talking about the hurricanes and the effects on the markets, et cetera. And we've got Michelle Livingstone, VP of Transportation from the Home Depot, talk about second quarter results and their green initiatives, et cetera, their sustainability. And then Ryan Houfek is going to come on and talk about the $1.8 billion gray chassis lawsuit, ATA OSEMA, and he's fired up. That's going to be good.
It is going to be good, and this is an interactive show as always. So
Absolutely.
We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, I believe YouTube as well, and FreightWaves TV. And,
yeah, get your comments and questions in.
Yep, we'll be monitoring your questions and everything, but why don't we just
let's jump into it.
Started.
Yeah, let's welcome Craig Fuller to the show. Our CEO and founder, Craig Fuller, is going to talk about the hurricanes here, and we'll ask him some stuff, and we'll get some good information on what's happening in those markets. Looks like he's live from Havana there, overlooking the. Where are you at there, Craig? Where are you calling in from?
I am just at my house here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. See, a lot of people don't realize this, but not only is Chattanooga Freight Alley, where we have so much activity happening, but just outside of the city is one of the most beautiful parts of the country. This is the Tennessee River Gorge behind me, and you can get land out here for less than a New York City apartment.
And you get to watch your favorite thing, right? Your favorite form of transportation, which is barges, I believe. Is that right?
I'm a fan of the barge. I think it's because, I love trucks. I love truckers. I love trucks. Yeah. I love rail. I love air. I love any form of movement. Barges captivate me because they're so massive and they haul so much freight down the river. I would not trust if I were in certain sectors, I wouldn't use it for my supply chain. But it is pretty cool.
Awesome.
It's raw materials.
So, Craig, we had the dual threat of hurricane. Now, Marco, I guess, has kind of petered out a little bit, right? It's kind of been absorbed by some stuff he gave up. Marco gave way to Laura, right? So that's not strange, I guess. But what's going on? What's going on there? You've got such a good history and a lot of expertise in FEMA and preparation and the relief efforts afterwards, that type of stuff. What's your perspective on what's going on here with this hurricane?
Yeah, so I ran FEMA disaster logistics for U.S. Express and the Express Direct operation. So a lot of knowledge of what is about to take place. And I think what we're seeing with this particular hurricane is it looks like it's going to hit the bullseye of the Petro Coast. And if you think about what that means, that is off the coast of southern Louisiana to Texas is really where the density of all the offshore oil refineries are, offshore oil rigs, the refineries that are on land. They bring that oil in, and it's a massive part of the industrial infrastructure of the United States. From a freight production standpoint, the challenge is that it will take those petrochemical, take that infrastructure offline for potentially a couple of days, if not longer.
Certainly, especially the refineries down there. I'm sure that the oil or the offshore oil rigs are already shut down. But what do you think that's going to do with the diesel pricing and diesel availability down on the Gulf Coast around East Texas and Western Louisiana?
Yeah, we've seen this play out before. This is a situation that everyone should be cautious around diesel activity and having access to diesel. So ensuring that if your drivers are out there, it's not so much where you're located in terms of being in the eye of the storm, but it's ensuring that you have access to diesel, because those pipelines could potentially be shut down. If this hurricane takes out any of the big pipelines, the Colonial is the big one that serves the Southeast, that could create a lot of issues in terms of diesel supply. So the recommendation is, if you're a driver over the road, be sure to top off your diesel tanks and keep it topped off for the next couple of days until we get some resolution or a feeling that the storm and the damage is behind us.
So, Craig, an interesting thing is kind of almost, I guess, the lack of response in the freight markets. I would say, like, when we had the hurricane coming up the East Coast and it was Category 5 about to hit, you saw this massive reaction days in advance, and we're kind of not seeing that a little bit right now. Is it because it's still a couple days out, or is it because it wasn't really thought to become major until like recently it could become major, and where it's hitting, the geography of where it's hitting? Does that make huge differences in that?
Two things. You have to remember how big that part of the country is in terms of freight production. So, relative to other markets, there's a lot of industrial activity that happens in that part of the country. Now, a lot of it moves out over pipelines and over barges and other types of transportation equipment. So when we look at outbound production, the more worrisome is along that Texas coast, where you have a lot of those petrochemical plants and such in places like Orange, Texas and stuff. And so we haven't seen a reaction yet. What we have seen are shippers that are in the area are starting to accelerate their shipments. So the inbound or the tender lead time is actually dropping precipitously. So it's what that is suggesting is that shippers are trying to accelerate their orders, knowing that they potentially will lose capacity and will have weather issues that could disrupt their operations for the next couple of days. And so we are seeing an acceleration in tender times, or how fast they want the freight picked up. That is showing up in the data. We've seen inbound tender or inbound activity of trucks moving into the market slow down. So we're seeing a drop of that by about 20%. It's very hard, though, to look at this from to know exactly, because this market is so screwed up. If you think about 2020, it's very hard to get a handle on all the stuff that's happening, because this market is unlike anything we've ever seen. Historical models just aren't much value right now, simply because so many things are changing in society. And so it's hard to look at the hurricane in itself and say, okay, this is exactly the reason. I did see the tender lead times drop, and that was pretty telling, because those tend to be much more consistent even in a COVID world. And that is telling that shippers are reacting to this.
So, Craig, first off, Hope White, who's a CEO of HT White Logistics, says great view. And Jason McIntyre says great to see the Midday Market update back, which is good.
I don't disagree with that.
Good. Craig, we're looking at a path of or not a path, but a timing of Thursday evening for the hurricane to make sure. What can we expect on FEMA disaster relief and kind of the scale of those operations, depending on where it hits and the size and the wind speeds and the surge once it moves on shore?
Yeah, Louisiana is unfortunately not the best state in terms of managing disasters. I hate to say it. And we saw what happened during Katrina. They hopefully have learned from what happened to Katrina. But the state itself has not been tested to the degree that other states have in recent years. And so we're going to see how Louisiana, and a lot of the success of a disaster relief initiative and response is up to the states. And so you have to remember, at the end of the day, FEMA is effectively an insurance company. They are basically the government backstopping money to assist in these disasters. But it's ultimately up to the states to manage the disaster reliefs. It's also up to 7 different organizations. The Army Corps of Engineers is involved. So you have a lot of municipalities, states, and then the federal government that's getting involved. But FEMA is usually the last. The president has to declare a disaster before FEMA can get involved. And FEMA will start pre-positioning freight. So you'll start seeing both the states and the federal government pre-position freight outside of the path of the storm, so that when the storm hits and has resolved its path into the mainland, that basically those trucks can come in and provide relief supplies. Now, one of the things that's interesting that you have Home Depot on, because if anyone is really on what we call pre-run up, because there's really 3 stages of the storm. There's the pre-run up, there's the storm itself, and then there's the relief, and then you have recovery. Actually, four pieces of it. But if you think about who's really involved right now, it's the Home Depots, it's the big box hardware stores, it's the big box retailers that are actually providing a lot of initial supplies for preparation. So things like plywood, gas cans, batteries, flashlights, those things, generators are going to be provided by the Home Depots of the world to help prepare supplies. So I'm interested to hear what Michelle has to say and offer in terms of what they're doing around these hurricanes, because they build these hurricane rooms, and when we were providing logistics, or I was in logistics, we would actually go into Home Depot's headquarters, and there would be this massive war room they would set up to really provide logistic support to their stores.
Yeah, what do you think? So capacity going into next week, going into the recovery, what do you think that's going to do to capacity not only in that region, but do you think that's going to give capacity throughout the country another strain?
Yeah, for sure. So what we see is when these storms happen, is they completely disrupt everything. And so what actually takes place is the big box retailers are in the initial preparation, are ordering lots of freight. And the carriers will respond to those. The Home Depots and Lowe's and the Walmarts of the world and Costco's have a lot of leverage over their contracted carriers. They're going to ask for additional capacity. Carriers are going to prioritize that for really two reasons. One is they obviously want to maintain the customer relationship. Sometimes those stores will provide additional financial resources in terms of paying for deadhead and repositioning. So they actually help the carriers out. And the second thing is, I think the carriers, logistics companies feel an obligation and a need to respond to these things, and so they'll prioritize that freight. But when they prioritize that freight, the hurricane related freight, what it actually does is creates a massive impact to the rest of the market, because now you have this absorption of capacity responding to the hurricane, and you have this then you have the influx of FEMA loads, which is really vibrant in the spot market. A lot of brokers are involved in that, and that just takes capacity from everywhere else. And when we were doing disaster relief loads, we were getting 700 to 1,000 loads out of Canada to places like Virginia and Florida, which seems really strange, but that's just how it works. And so we were moving freight from California, from Canada, from all over. And so what happens with disaster loads is it's not just the state, in this case, the state of Texas, Louisiana. It's places like, the Great Lakes could be impacted. California could be impacted. The Southeast is certainly impacted. So you're going to see a lot of available capacity leave the market as drivers end up responding to these new loads in demand. The thing that I always tell drivers is, if you're going to take a relief load, you should know what you're getting into. Because even though the spot market may pay you a high spot rate on a per mile basis, there's a lot of things that you need to be prepared with. And so make sure that you get paid detention. And this is really important, because when you go into a disaster site, you're talking about a multi-day or week commitment. So if you take a relief load, you may be down at these sites for over a week. It's not unheard of to be there for multiple weeks. And so what happens is you're one of hundreds, if not thousands, of trucks that are going into a disaster zone. You're a number, literally, as you go into these relief sites, and they're typically held at military bases, Air Force bases, or Army bases, because you have the land to park thousands of trucks. And oftentimes the folks on the ground don't have a sense of where they want to send the equipment or the trucks. And what they'll send these trucks out to is these unloading sites at like a Walmart or an HEB at a grocery store, and they'll unload there by hand. And so there's a lot of time it takes to get all that equipment, to get that freight off before you can get out of there. And so if you may be the first guy there, but you may be the last guy out. It's just there is no organization, or relatively little organization. So when you get there, be prepared to sit for a while and make sure that you get paid detention. So getting confirmation sheets which confirm you get paid detention. Remember, the brokers that are involved in these disaster loads are getting paid detention. They're collecting on your behalf. So if you're not ensuring that you're getting paid, you're getting screwed. So don't get screwed. Make sure you get paid. That's what the detention process is for. The other thing to keep in mind is you want to have something to entertain yourself. So be sure to bring some form of non-electronic entertainment, or entertainment that doesn't require an internet connection. Because remember, cell phones probably won't work in a big disaster zone. So you want to make sure that you're prepared.
Excellent advice. We talked about this earlier, was it yesterday or Friday? I guess we talked about this, and
on what the truck, right?
Yeah, on what the truck, and it's really excellent advice. I'm looking at the 3D map of the United States right now, Craig, and I've got OTRI and actually ITVI up. A bit of a strange combination, but I'm looking at this to see. You've got Houston with massive upticks of inbound, which you were talking about, but it's also reducing the outbound tender rejection, right? So there's available capacity that's there. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be turning. Atlanta is also massive as well. Go ahead.
Michael, you got to remember why carriers are probably not rejecting loads is they're trying to get their drivers out of harm's way.
Yeah, exactly.
So the carriers are just going to accept practically anything that moves them out of the storm. And so they're going to be a lot less discriminating outbound, but inbound is where you see the margin opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's right along that coast. Houston seems to be the biggest affected with the inbound, although, New Orleans over there towards Lake Charles and Port Arthur, the inbound is increasing over there, but so is the OTRI. I guess maybe there's more staging closer to there, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, they're not going to stage. They don't typically
I mean, that's
stage,
a little close.
Well, they won't stage at this point of the storm in an area that will potentially be in the eye. And so what they'll do is they'll stage about 400 miles off the coast. Mm-hmm. And so where I would expect to be staging is places like there's Air Force bases and military bases in Alabama, around Montgomery. You can see them down by outside of Atlanta. There's one in Columbus, Georgia. That's a military base, and even in Dallas, you could see it. So I would not expect them to be bringing in FEMA disaster or staging equipment that could be potentially impacted by the storm that serves nobody.
Right, and those markets that you just mentioned right there are showing inbound quite elevated right now.
If this hits the big petrochemical part of Texas, then it will have a far more and greater impact to the industrial economy than if it hits somewhere in a field or not a field, but in a loosely populated non-industrial area. And so where it hits is going to really impact it. And then population centers are obviously a big concern. From probably the greatest concern is Houston, simply because it's such an important and densely populated city. Just in terms of what it could do in terms of damage, but it doesn't look like from the current path that it's headed that way.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Craig. I've got the critical events pulled up one last time so people can see that, the critical events map in Sonar showing the forecasted models where it's tracking, and it looks like right up just east of Port Arthur, right in there, Port Charles area, in between New Orleans and Houston, certainly closer to Houston than New Orleans. And Houston is certainly not out of the path completely right now, but it looks like it'll go right up Port Arthur. That's what it looks like.
It does. It does, which is, you don't want any direct hits on Houston. We remember 2017 with Harvey, and that was a storm in of itself, because of the rainfall and how it rotated around and just never left Houston for almost like 2 weeks, right?
Right. That's right.
That was, and then you had Miami, and then we had a very tight market going into those, or ramping up into those hurricanes.
That's right.
And we all know what happened afterwards, the fourth quarter of 2017 and 2018. And we have a freight market that we're kind of seeing right now.
We are.
And we have Zach Strickland over here.
Yeah, Zach Strickland, our Director of Freight Market Intelligence. We'll talk about the freight markets right now. What's going on there, Zach?
So I'm going to talk about everything that's not hurricane related, because I think y'all did a good job there. But the rest of the freight market, we're still in the middle of this, really tight environment. Volumes continue to increase. Tender rejections continue to increase. We're still trending to a tighter scenario across the country. A lot of the markets a lot of the tightness is originated on the West Coast. We've talked about this almost ad nauseum. We hear about it all the time. That I even wrote an article about it over the weekend about this huge boom on the import side coming to the West Coast, hitting the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and we're starting to see some of that translate to other ports across the country. Volumes are really just entering the country right now from all angles. The West Coast continues to lead the pack, though. One of the highest rejection rates of any of the largest markets in the United States right now, Los Angeles and or Ontario, right around 28% tender rejection rate. The East Coast is, maybe not, on the top of everybody's mind, but tender rejection rates are actually higher out of the Harrisburg market than on the West Coast right now, indicating obviously, carriers probably are avoiding the Northeast a little bit more often than they would have, since they have a lot of optionality in the market right now. Looking further towards the Southeast, we've got the Atlanta market, middling around a 23% tender rejection rate. But what's most surprising to me is that everybody's kind of ignored the Midwest, including myself, in terms of what we're seeing with Midwest capacity. The Midwest is really kind of considered this hub of the national freight market. You've got Chicago sitting there with the railhead, intermodal sectors right there as well, but not as much capacity tightness in the Midwest as we're seeing such. Like Seattle, for instance, is now getting tender rejection rates similar to that of Chicago. And nobody really considers the Northwest as a tight freight market in general, because you just try to get as many trucks as you can out of that area as possible.
What do you think is driving the Seattle tightness of the market?
There is a seasonal component to the Northwest this time of year. August, little known fact, is that August is actually the produce season for the Pacific Northwest. You have a lot of harvests up there, cherries, blueberries. Obviously, there's potatoes and apples that occur a little bit later in the year, but they still happen this time of year as well in certain areas. But the Yakima Valley up there has all sorts of stuff going on. Also, Kevin, I know you're going to be excited to hear that the hop harvest is right here around the corner as well. So again, a lot of specialty freight up there right now. And again, when we're talking about produce, that's a lot of high dollar freight. So, that's why we probably see some of these contracted accounts get lower compliance rates this time of year, because you see some of these carriers go out and find they can make, anywhere from 10 to 15x on their margins of what they were making earlier in the year.
That is definitely music in my ears. It's hop season, Michael Vincent.
Hey, I'm with you, man.
Definitely. So we have a strong West Coast. What do you think? The Allentown, the Northeast, is that market softening right now, Zach?
So we're still seeing a lot of volumes. And of course, the Northeast is a little bit different freight market than the rest of the country. When we talk about West Coast tightness, that's normally because it's very hard to balance your network when you have an abundance of West Coast freight. A lot of that freight moves over 800, 900 miles. Again, the population isn't quite as dense out west. So that means that a lot of this freight moves from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City, Los Angeles to Phoenix. And that's your short haul freight out there. Out east, around Harrisburg and all that, it's going maybe 100, 200 miles tops to get from the DCs to the end points. So, when you see carriers rejecting more freight in the Northeast, it's more often they just don't want to go further into the Northeast. Not because simply they're out of space or out of coverage, unlike the West. The West is much harder to get back into. There's a lot of population around the Northeast, but a lot of carriers, especially when they have options in other places, especially when they're trying to get back out west to make some money, they'll try to avoid going further into that environment.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the maps there. We've got, as far as outbound tender rejections, you got the extreme Northeast, Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont. If you're trying to get out of there, if you're trying to ship out of there, forget it. Nobody's taking a load out of there. I guess it's because there's no inbound as well, because I've got the outbound tender rejects and the inbound with it, right?
Yeah.
Now, right in the center of the country, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, etc., very high outbound tender rejections in that area of the country.
Yeah, and the middle part of the country that you just mentioned, Arkansas and Missouri, tends to have a higher tender rejection rate there than a lot of places, just simply because it is kind of no man's land for a lot of carriers. Not as much inbound in relation to a lot of that outbound production. So it does tend to be a little bit imbalanced right there. Dallas, of course, has been, one of the hotter markets of the summer. Excuse the pun, but it's starting to cool off a little bit here over the last few days. Dallas, of course, right along the edges of the hurricane, so some carriers could be trying to get themselves into a position where they can be part of that recovery effort as well. But again, a lot of that moisture and wind is supposed to head up through Arkansas, which is a kind of a reefer belt, if you will, for a lot of the meat production. Obviously, some agricultural impact right there as well. So, that depending on the path of the hurricane and the extent of the damage, that could really disrupt the reefer networks up there.
It really could. I mean, so what do you think on capacity going into next week? What should all market participants, whether you're a carrier, broker, or shipper, need to know about further capacity constraints that will probably happen with the hurricane?
Yeah, so I would, it just so happens that we're having another hurricane around Labor Day. Capacity tightens traditionally around Labor Day anyway, because a lot of people, again, coming off the road, wanting that extended day off, et cetera. So I don't think that we're going to see any dramatic changes in the market through next week. I would expect, brokers need to make sure that their margins are certainly padded in a lot of these areas. Depending on the extent of the damage of the hurricane and the extent of the impact of the overall hurricane, I would just be prepared to pay more next week for capacity. And if you're a shipper out there, if you can hold some of your freight into the period after Labor Day or a little bit later, that's probably preferable, especially considering the fact that if we do have some sort of wide-scale damage, large-scale damage from the hurricane, all those carriers are going to get sucked into that relief effort, making a lot of money. So you are going to expect to pay a premium here over the next week or so.
Excellent stuff, Zach. Thank you so much for those insights. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with the hurricane, right, Kevin?
We will. It looks
does it strengthen? Does it strengthen? I mean, I lived in South Florida for a number of years, and I can't tell you how many times you thought it was a Category 2, and afterwards it was a 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. Right, I mean, when it comes to that last little bit of strengthening, can catch you off guard.
Yeah, so we'll be keeping an eagle eye on the track of the storm, the strength of the storm coming in. It looks like Thursday evening, the eye will make landfall. So we'll probably see the actual storm winds, rain Thursday afternoon, Thursday morning, and the Thursday afternoon, and then we'll see what we are in store for.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
We shall move on.
Excellent. We have our next guest is Michelle Livingstone, who is VP of Transportation at the Home Depot. This is her first time on the show, but welcome to the show, Michelle. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Can you, for those people that have been living under a rock, can you give us a little, what is this Home Depot that we're speaking of, and a little bit of background on yourself so we have a perspective?
Sure. Well, I think hopefully everyone on the call knows that Home Depot is the largest home improvement retailer in the world. So we've got a few things going on. And I've had the pleasure of serving as the Vice President of Transportation at Home Depot for the past almost 13 years. And previously, I was at Kraft Foods for a number of years and J.C. Penney and C&S Wholesale Grocers. So I have been very fortunate to be in the transportation industry for quite a while at this point.
Yeah,
excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Michelle. So, can you kind of give us a little bit of a flavor for Home Depot's role in the world today? Right. I mean, we've talked about this as far as home improvement and coronavirus, et cetera. Can you shed a little color on that? What is Home Depot's role today?
Sure. Home Depot is North America based, so we have stores in Canada, U.S., and Mexico. And in terms of our current pandemic situation, obviously we're very fortunate that we were considered an essential retailer early on, and we take that role very seriously. It was really from the beginning all about protecting our associates, protecting our customers, and it's really heartwarming to work for a company who put people first and profit second. So it truly has been a very interesting experience. 2020 will certainly be a year to remember. Hopefully it won't go into 2021, but it's been really great that we've been able to serve our communities, serve our associates, and serve our customers in so many different ways.
Yeah, and the Home Depot's had an integral part in COVID. Home improvement. We tracked Bank of America debit and credit card payments that they publish on a weekly basis, and it's year over year. There's been big dips in spending across the board except for home improvement, and that's consistently been up around 25 or 30%.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I built swing hinge in my backyard.
So you guys are shipping more product around. Demand for carriers all through the pandemic, through the fall off and then the cliff, or the run up in March, the fall off in April, and then the current run up. So what lessons have you learned, and what have you seen working with your carriers?
Yeah, absolutely. Home Depot reported our second quarter earnings, and we were up 25% for U.S. store comp. So that definitely translated into actually even a higher percentage of shipments. We are very much primarily a full truckload carrier, shipping dedicated and one way and intermodal and LTL and parcel. So we are definitely an equal opportunity shipper. But I think what we've learned going through this situation, particularly as capacity has tightened, is that our relationship with our carriers really it's extremely important. And we're very fortunate. I tell them all the time, we couldn't do what we do if they didn't do what they did. And we really take very seriously the shipper of choice. That wasn't anything new to Home Depot. It's something that we've been actually preaching for many years, probably attributed to my father being in trucking when I was growing up. And so he made me very aware of the carrier perspective. And I've been able to hold that my entire professional life. And we certainly want to do a shout out to FreightWaves for recognizing Home Depot in 3 different categories. We are so proud that we earned that category, and we're working harder to be selected in even more categories for next year. So thank you for that recognition.
Yep, that's definitely the FreightWaves shipper of choice, and Home Depot took it.
It is, but I was going to say, obviously, what you talk about your focus on your strong relationships with your carriers, and the thought process that you couldn't do what you do if they didn't do what they do, and winning those awards. We didn't bestow them upon you. Those were voted on by those carriers to give those to you. So
we have a
congratulations for that.
But you created the forum.
That is true. Yeah. That is true. But I want to make sure the audience knew that it wasn't us that chose you. It is more importantly, it was the community of logistics and carriers that chose Home Depot as in those categories. So congratulations for that, Michelle.
And Michelle, we have a shout out for you specifically from Hope White, who's CEO of HT White Logistics. I don't know if you were former coworkers or she was a carrier partner of yours.
Yes. Well, that was very thoughtful. I appreciate that. I don't think I've ever gotten a shout out on line like this before. So
it's pretty awesome. So, Michelle, one of the things that struck me recently was you were talking about the sustainability efforts at the Home Depot and some of the tremendous results that you guys have already had, and it was. To me, what struck me was the point that I took out of it was that how it was done, right? Through optimization and working with those carriers and cube utilization, et cetera. And really just, to coin a phrase, working smarter and not harder. Can you speak to those sustainability efforts, kind of, where you guys are at, the results you have, and what's the focus importance of focus moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We like to say that orange is the new green. We are very, very sustainably minded. And I think what's really exciting from a transportation perspective is everything that we do to reduce costs is actually more sustainable. So when you think about being able to fill up a truck more, making sure that every truck is fully loaded, making sure that we're using the right mode, using intermodal where we can or rail where we can, that's really important to us. It's the ability to optimize our dedicated fleet more effectively so that we can reduce our empty miles. And that's probably one of the initiatives that I'm most excited about because we've been able to partner with other shippers in a couple different forums to take advantage of their private fleets. They're taking advantage of our dedicated fleets, and it's really been a good partnership. And when you think about the number of empty miles that are reduced as a result of collaboration like that in the industry, it's tremendous. So it's in our DNA that we do this. It's important to our customers, and we are all about doing the right thing. So we will continue to stay very focused on sustainability and for all the right things. So we will continue to, as we build out our network and get closer to the customer, that's also another way of reducing miles and operating more greenly. So we've got a lot of great initiatives going on.
That sounds fantastic, Michelle. And Rhonda Bumpensena Zimmerman, who's Director of Fitness and Wellness at Global Trans, says, I love my local Home Depot, shop there often, even during COVID. So there's another fan.
Thank you.
I echo that. I spend a lot of money at the Home Depot. I absolutely do. It's been tremendous. And what you were talking about there, Michelle, is a really a great point. Is reducing those empty miles does so much good. It's good for carrier relations. One, it's good for green initiatives because you're reducing the burning of fossil fuels by less trips and less miles being burned, and it lowers transportation costs for everybody. And if you can do that collaboration, like you said, with other shippers, and bring in these kind of collaborative partnerships that normally wouldn't be organic to your business, it's a tremendous help. Can you talk a little bit to the carrier relations and how that really helped you make that difference?
Yeah, so we work closely with our dedicated carriers in particular to either leverage their own network or to take advantage of other shippers' networks to be able to do exactly what you're saying. It is a bit of a heavy lift. I don't want to let anyone walking away from this call saying, oh, this is a breeze. It does require a lot of analytical support to make that happen because you're comparing a large number of lanes in both networks to find the right fits, but it's certainly worthwhile pursuing.
That's great.
Excellent.
Yeah. So what's on the outlook for Q3 and beyond for yourself and Home Depot?
Well, hopefully it will be a little less focused on the immediate situation, which is keeping everyone busy, and that's between the hurricanes and obviously the additional sales that we're so blessed and fortunate to have, but is taxing our supply chain a bit as we put through a lot of additional volume through our network. So we're hoping that we can really get back to fulfilling our goals and initiatives to further improve service and reduce costs.
Yeah. So, Michelle, real quick, hurricanes are obviously we've got a hurricane coming up in the Gulf, and there was the potential for two. Can you speak a little bit about the impact of hurricanes on Home Depot and kind of what your efforts are there at Home Depot, how you play a role in, like we were talking about, the lead up and the staging and the recovery and so on and so forth. Can you speak to that a little bit about what the efforts there at Home Depot during these type of disasters, these hurricanes?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first thing everyone should know is that our stores make it a point of being the last ones to leave and close up and the first ones to return because we recognize customers are trying to protect their homes and we want to be there to support them. So that's the first thing. We do a lot of preparation for hurricanes. Obviously, almost every year we have at least one doozy and some years we have more than that. And so we do prepare. It's a little tricky sometimes to know exactly where they're going to hit, but the way that our network is set up, we have inventory placed in strategic places. And what you need before the hurricane is a different type of product than what you need after the hurricane. And so it really takes focus on both the pre and post storm. And from a transportation perspective, again, we're fortunate to have a network of great carriers who are willing to support us in our efforts to get product moved to stores as quickly as possible. So, I guess I would say at this point in time, we have a fair amount of experience, but every storm is a little different. And so, we don't take anything for granted. But we are opening up our Hurricane Command Center tomorrow. So we're very focused on the current situation.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Michelle. We're out of time. I would ask you where people can go to learn more about the Home Depot, but I'm pretty sure they know if they look up the HomeDepot.com, they're gonna get there, right?
Always interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Always interesting. The you
don't think about the fact that they have to bring in and schedule the different types of supplies and change. What she said, what struck me was like, that makes perfect sense, is that there's different needs before, during, and after a hurricane, right? And they've got to be there. And you have to think about those store associates in the stores and the operations. They're trying to stay open longer and open earlier, and if they can, throughout the entire situation, as close to the storm and the damage as possible, right? So, I mean, these people truly become, disaster relief and preparedness heroes during these type of situations, right?
They definitely do. And it's a very complex task, as we're saying. It's different inventory is needed, or different goods, different products are needed, after a hurricane or during that process than what's going to be on the store shelf. So there's a lot of movement around, and it's a complex supply chain system that is always changing, and you have to be very adaptable and flexible to meet those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our next topic that we're going to be talking about is something that people don't really... It's one of those things, unless you're into this specific vertical or space in transportation, you really don't understand the dynamics that are going on, right?
It's complex, right? Unless you're in the port and you know about about this chassis and the sharing and the allocation, it's another complex issue that. As I said, if you don't follow it, it's hard to grasp.
It really is, and I was in the space for a number of years in South Florida as a NVOCC and a carrier. So we had liner service and NVOCC and running through it. And we had our own chassis moving back and forth, right? But you always saw these yards full of chassis, and you saw these mountains of containers, and trying to understand whose were whose and how do they even keep track of where all these different things are. But what we're talking about is chassis management in the United States, and so we had an article and. Was it
Chris Gillis?
Chris Gillis wrote the article, right? It was last week, I guess it came out, right?
Yes.
So it's on FreightWaves.com, and you can check that out. So it's truckers seek $18 billion from ocean carriers for alleged chassis overcharges is what's going on. And if you don't know the backstory, what's happening there is the American trucking industry has filed a cease and desist request with the U.S. Federal Maritime Commission over what it says are ocean container carriers distorting the cost of chassis usage. So the American Trucking Association, or Intermodal Motor Carrier Conference, filed the complaint against OCEMA, which is the Ocean Carrier Equipment Management Association, and 10 of its carriers members with the FMC on Monday. The complaint also calls for OCEMA and the members to pay the trucking industry damages of up to $1.8 billion to resolve the overcharges for chassis use. So what you're talking about is them owning chassis that are now being basically state-run.
So state-run and be heavily regulated, right? So there would be fixed charges, fixed allocation, depending on some complex system that an association or a government authority would actually monitor and prescribe the processes and procedures for doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, the implications aren't just negative for someone like DCLI, right? For direct chassis links, which it obviously would, right? It would cut into their revenues, et cetera. But then it cuts into their ability to actually maintain all those chassis.
Yes.
I mean, they're not in this, to be philanthropists, right?
It's very true.
They're making money. They're providing a good service, and so you would have all these other smaller carriers, et cetera, that are not in this association that are going to be stuck. That could potentially be stuck with these chassis that are very ill managed and not very well maintained, which causes safety issues, et cetera, right?
Exactly right. So the current system of chassis, there's always a problem with imports and railroads as well as chassis management.
Yeah.
Making sure that chassis are where they need to be for the demand. Having the supply meet the demand at different areas, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't work really perfectly, but
you'd start having container reject at the crane,
exactly right.
At the gantry crane, no chassis.
Yeah, so there's a lot of room for improvement in that system, but maybe not necessarily making a gray pool.
Yeah, exactly. A private enterprise can improve this.
It could.
Right? I don't know where the detention charges come into hand in the $1.8 billion that they're trying to claim in overcharges, I guess it was.
Yeah, it's a very inefficient system, so I'm sure the invoices are flying around. It's the trucking industry.
Yeah.
There's invoices flying around. You don't always, it's hard to keep track of them.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly
and that's something that we were talking about last week on the Carrier Summit, which was a fantastic virtual conference here at FreightWaves.
Yeah, it absolutely was.
We had a day and a half full of sessions. Michael Vincent and Duna are live, recapping everything. And all of those sessions are available on FreightWaves TV.
They are. Have you gone back and looked at any of them? They were awesome.
I have, yes.
Keynote speakers.
The
Stutz was amazing.
He was amazing.
It was awesome.
He really was amazing. I wasn't sure what to expect, but he was so engaging, had great stories, and really nailed in the point of using data and consumer data to really matching up with your digital advertising for driver recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. It was tremendous. Some of the other highlights. There was that, which I thought was amazing, but one of my other favorites, and close second to that, was really Fuller Speed Ahead.
Yes.
With Craig and Eric Fuller actually talking about Variant and talking about how it came to pass and how they did really negative space analysis to form this almost separate company, right? And we don't want to be influenced by our legacy operations, et cetera. This needs to be new. It needs to be driver focused. It needs to be customer focused. It needs to be efficient focused. And we don't want any of that, well, we did it this way, influence on that improvement. Really just a brilliant way of attacking an issue.
It is. And it's so sometimes what sounds the riskiest is actually the safest choices. And that kind of reminds me of
your youth?
Of what?
Of your youth?
Of my youth, yes. Definitely of my youth. But thanks again to Seat My Trucks and 10th Street, who had great sessions on driver recruiting. Our own Andrew Cox did an awesome interview with Sadie Church about attracting younger drivers to the industry, and all of that is on demand at FreightWaves TV or FreightCats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So our virtual conferences.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what the good news is?
What is the good news?
Because we always do a good news at the end of the show, right?
Let's do it.
Here's the good news. There's another one.
There is.
There is. The next virtual event is Global Trade Tech, presented by American Shipper. And that's going to be September 16th and 17th. Another virtual event, right? So you don't need to register. You don't need to pay. I would register, though, because we gave away a Peloton.
A Peloton bike plus, what, $50 in
a bunch of, it was like 5 or 6 different $50
Yeah, but the Peloton was the grand prize.
That was the grand prize. That was a grand prize.
Yeah.
So,
and there's an awesome community that's in Slack in every one of our virtual conferences.
Yeah.
And great methods for networking. Doing your, getting noticed, getting out there, commenting in real time on the segments.
Yeah,
I bet you on this one we're going to talk about chassis.
We should.
Oh, I know we should. You know.
I mean, but anyways, let me read the copy here for this event. So it's a global trade tech event, and it's virtual again. So it's going to be awesome. And like you mentioned, I mean, great content, but also that Slack channel and the Slack rooms, and being able to discuss and get real time feedback from fellow audience members, et cetera, is just tremendous. And the connections that are made are unbelievable. I always make a ton of new great connections during these things, but. This event will feature quick-fire demos again. We'll do the quick-fire demos of the latest technology, and we'll have, obviously inspiring keynote presentations from industry and business leaders, and a smorgasbord of influencers, investors, and supply chain experts. This mix is sure to keep the attendees on the cusp of the latest trends and factors impacting the global freight tech industry in 2020. Our industry is becoming increasingly digitized, and speed, efficiency, safety, and communication strategies are improving daily. FreightWaves Live Global Tech will showcase the technologies and services that use data to project and monitor the freight markets. Data-driven discussions and presentations will provide deep insight into current, near-term, and forward-looking trends that are shaping the global freight and logistics market. Regardless of the role you play in supply chains, you can expect to come away from this experience energized and informed to tackle the biggest challenges facing your industries. A couple key points inside there, Kevin, that are really important, right? It's, so there's always been, well, not always, well, yeah, I guess there has always been this improvement in tech, right? This drive for better things. I mean, from the invention of the shipping container, the standardized shipping container, which is like,
the box.
Right, the box.
I know, right? The box, which is an excellent book.
Right, and exactly. And now we're moving into this new era where we've had this huge stressor on the entire world, which always breeds innovation, right? It breeds new technology, and it accelerates those that are already in the work. And that's what we're experiencing right now. So what comes out of this that is a box, a standardized box, right? What is that? Wow, we couldn't have lived from that. We're going to learn about all those different things.
We are. And I think we're going to tackle the data-driven approach. And as we all know, trucking logistics is like a tsunami of data that has entered the industry. It keeps on pouring in over the last 5, 6, 10 years. And we're going to talk about how to manage that data.
Yeah.
Because there's good, I wouldn't say there's good and bad data, but there's actionable data, and then there's some that's noise, and how do you interpret that? And you have data sets that are so huge that sorting through it takes months over years.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, you're actually absolutely right with your statement that you backed away from a little bit. Was there's good and bad data. Even good data is bad data if you don't know what the heck to do with it.
Oh yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Or you can't integrate it, right? And we learned a lot about that at the Carrier Summit.
Yes.
We'll learn a lot about that in the International Summit, because that siloed data becomes just exponentially even larger, the different silos of data, when you start talking about international global trade, not just domestic, right? And connecting all that data together and making it useful, not only in just tactical decision makings and knowing what's going on with your freight and your supply chain now, but projecting what is going to happen into the future. And as people try and diversify in their supply chain, as we've seen the talk of, we've talked about just in time versus just in case, et cetera, and the diversification of your suppliers across the globe, and how difficult that type of thing can be, as Steve Ferrara can tell you. It's not as easy as just saying, well, we'll buy Christmas lights from, India and Cambodia, right? It's not that easy to do, right?
No.
This information is extremely important. And the other point in this is, even if you're not directly in international shipping, it affects you on a daily basis.
It does. Well, it really does.
It does.
Most consumer products are from overseas. I won't say most, but a large percentage of them are. So it does really affect your day to day, and real-time visibility.
Yeah,
is still not really conquered. There's major inroads into it, but it certainly isn't anywhere near perfection yet. So getting into the future or forecasting something it takes a lot of data and analytics. And,
whether you're a manufacturer, a shipper, manufacturer, an end consumer, or in between, and you're in the supply chain, it affects you, right?
It does.
I mean, you can make all the hand sanitizer on the planet, right here in Chattanooga, but if we don't have the containers to put it in, the squeeze bottles that you get from China, what good is it going to do? I mean,
it's going to be a barrel,
right? Or if you're a carrier, etc. These ports of entry, the volume fluctuations up and down, you got to be paying attention to, because that can change pricing and availability of not only loads but the capacity, etc. Right? So if you're normally railing or utilizing intermodal, the fluctuations in international shipping put pressures on that pricing in those containers and move them around. So you've got to pay attention.
So that's September 16th and 17th, 2020. So keep an eye out. We'll be talking about it every day on the Midday Market Update. And at 2 o'clock coming up, Andrew Cox and I are joined by Seth Holm, the Freight Intel Group, and we're going to be on Great Quarter Guys, where finance meets freight, and we'll discuss and debate certain topics. One of the main topics that we'll be talking about is, are we looking at an inflationary cycle or a deflationary cycle?
Is that on Great Quarter Guys?
That's on Great Quarter Guys, and
nice.
I think we disagree, which is good.
I love it.
Yeah,
so you guys
we'll have
argue?
a lively debate.
Fisticuffs.
I know. And then on Put That Coffee Down, the Freight Sales Show, Dooner and I will be talking about tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, live here on LinkedIn and Facebook, is role-playing. Role-playing in sales.
Cool.
Practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
Just like anything else in life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and yesterday I went to truck. We talked about an unprecedented pair of storms that could be still double trouble, which we've talked about again today as well. We had 10th Street partnership with Truckers Against Trafficking, which is a really, really important topic. And then we talked about, a widow of a murdered truck driver still seeking answers a number of years after the death, still unsolved, and the logistics of the logistics. And if you've missed any of these shows, check them out on demand on FreightWaves TV app or on your favorite podcast player, or subscribe to Freightcasts and get every single FreightWaves podcast all on one feed. That feed is also exclusive audio. Come to the Midday Market Update.
The Midday Market Update will be here at Thursday at 12 p.m. for the next edition, and we will be monitoring the hurricane. The eye probably won't have landed yet, but there will be weather events there. But until Thursday at 12 p.m., we'll see you later.
Peace.